I used to think of sales as this overly combative thing that you had to basically prove someone wrong or make someone's reality crumble in order to get them to say yes. Maybe it's a little bit of Wolf of Wall Street, maybe it's a little bit of the book The Challenger Sale, maybe it was just my own desire to release my rage onto the world and my rage and to say, fuck you, pay me to people. And, maybe you have some of these like romantic notions or romantic ideas, but I don't think that this is what is the most effective now that I've done sales over the course of many, many years in many, many different contexts. I'm no longer a full-time salesperson, but I use sales in my current vibe coding slash software development agency in order to sell people on products. And so I want to go over kind of what I used to think and now what I currently think about sales and how those differences make a big difference in not only how the prospect takes on the sale and whether or not it closes, but also how it makes me feel internally and throughout the entire call and looking up to the call and so on and so forth. A couple quick facts about my experience so this will make sense for you. In 2024, I sold over $500,000 in online coaching for a firm. I was a commission only salesperson at that point. I even helped with a little bit of their sales management and their marketing. In 2025 and now in 2026, I'm running my own business where again, I'm developing and building and selling software for businesses. And I've taken myself from selling things at like $100 per project or even like $20 an hour up to most recently things that are in the price range of $20,000 for a couple of months work. So I've taken myself from being someone that's fighting for crumbs and scraps into pricing and delivering very big projects. And I want to help you do the same. I think a lot of that comes down to your pricing confidence and your ability to sell your value. So what we're going to do is we're going to ignore that tennis ball in the background because it's bugging me right now. And what we're going to do is we're going to get into this. I'm going to open up a little bit of a document here and talk you through my process. Okay, so there's a lot of sales frameworks, but fundamentally the one that seems the most simple to me is going to be the closer architecture with Alex Ramosi. I'm going to use it again because it's very simple and you're in the internet space watching an internet sales video. I can assume you've heard of Alex Ramosi and you believe what he does works. Okay, so if you don't know, his basic outline is close, and then I'll do the other stuff right now, but C is clarify. Clarify is essentially you want to basically figure out what's going wrong for the prospect. What is your problem? Come in, sit down, show me, tell me, vent to me. What is your problem, right? Even if this is a business problem, there is frustration associated with it. There is a lack of being able to do something that they want to do. They want to make more money. They want to hire someone new. They want to install a new piece of software. They want to get rid of bad clients or something like that. There is something that they are coming to you to talk about to see if you can help them with. And so in the beginning, you want to say that. You want to say something as simple as, okay, today I want to get to understand what you're going through and to see how I can help you. That with a little bit of business context on what you do and something like that, depending on whether it's cold or warm traffic, will be enough to tell them that they can tell you what they need to have fixed. And once they tell you what they need to have fixed, then what you're going to move into is the second one here, which is to label it. So labeling is almost like clarifying in that you're identifying what the problem is, but the very clear difference is that clarifying it is them using their words and labeling it is you using your words to recap their words. Okay. This is something you can use in your relationships, whether personal or business, but when you're speaking with someone, if you want them to make sure that they feel understood and for you to ensure that you are understanding, then you recap what they just said. Okay. So if a business comes to me and they say, listen, we're having a bunch of issues because, our CRM's kind of scattered. Our salespeople don't know how to put down notes. There's a big issue of, some follow-up not being taken care of. And we have all this other stuff where we know we want to implement it because, if we just tried this other marketing thing, we could even, have some more volume in, and then we'd have this other thing going on and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'd be like, okay, great. Right. I would say, okay, great. Basically, what I'm hearing is that you're having a series of issues on the CRM not being fully utilized, meaning you're not following up as much as you need to. You're not keeping notes as much as you need to. And the reason why, we still maybe need to clarify that, but the basic idea is you're not getting the amount of sales you want, and it's coming down to the improper use of the CRM or the wrong CRM. So let's talk about that, right? So what I did there was just a small clarity and label loop. And then what we're going to do is now we're going to clarify, is it a problem with wrong CRM use? And do they just need CRM consulting on that specific one and maybe some automation put into that specific CRM? Or do they need to dump that one entirely because it just doesn't work for their business and they need to build one from the ground up? Those are two different problems, so it's important to clarify that stuff. And that's a very big thing with all of this. Don't be afraid to go into a few loops of this stuff because you really, really do need to clarify what's going on in order to build the proper thing. Especially if you're watching this channel and you have the abilities to do AI code, AI automation, and a bunch of different things, you know there's so much possibility now. We have so much power that now we need a little bit of control, right? We have so much power to wield that now we need a little bit of focus. We need to magnify that focus on the right problem to fix that problem. Maybe through this conversation, you find out that really, literally, the only thing that is stopping these people from making more money is a lack of follow-ups. Then that would be your key. And that might be the easiest just to install a simple automation rather than redoing an entire CRM. Or maybe you find out that the quality of the copy in the follow-ups is not happening. They're doing the follow-ups, but the quality is so pushy or aggressive or loose and not straightforward. Being able to clarify is a super, super big key because it'll, for one, make sure that you're building the right things, and two, make sure that your prospect feels understood, that you're understanding their problems. A key thing about this is that a lot of people think that you telling people about your skills or telling people about what you can build or telling people about this stuff is what really gets people to feel like you can handle this for them. But a lot of the work is actually in this part, being able to clarify and label by asking proper questions that dig into the problem and clarify what's going on. The old classic thing is to talk about a doctor, right? If a doctor sees you for a chest pain or something like that, you go in, you say to the doctor, I've been feeling kind of weird. My chest feels a little bit weird at night. If they say something like, oh, I went to medical school, I know what chests are like, I think you should take some ibuprofen and lay down. That'd probably not feel too good. But if a doctor says, does it hurt when you do a push-up? And you say, no. Does it hurt when you take a deep breath? You say, no. And they say, does it hurt after you eat a big meal? And you say, a little bit. Then they say, oh, okay. Does it hurt when you eat a spicy meal or a non-spicy meal? And you say, spicy meal. Then they're like, oh, okay, well, considering this, this, and this, then I think that your best bet is to consider this indigestion and then to take this action. But that whole first process there, that is actually them displaying their abilities through question asking. That's something that I always knew, like intellectually, but now that I actually care about what I'm building, to be honest with you, back then when I was a commission-only salesperson, I didn't care as much because I wasn't the one building the product. I wasn't the one doing the coaching. I just wanted to learn the skill of sales and get paid, to be honest with you. I didn't have that natural conviction to ask deep questions. I knew I was doing it for technical reasons for what I'm saying now because it works on a persuasive level. But when you're building your own services or delivering things and you've had the pain of people not liking what you build or saying, yeah, that's nice, but they never use it, that pain will teach you to really ask good, clear questions. Whether you're selling something that's your own or someone else's, understand this clarify and label loop will build the authority in their mind. Moving on to O, we have overview. And this one is more about kind of preempting some objections or some potential problems. So overview is about overviewing their past pain and attempts to fix this problem, right? So what they gave us here is basically a problem set. They said, hey, X has been a problem for a while, right? And in order to fix this, what we've tried to do is to do Y plus Z minus Q, right? They say Y is Z minus Q. And this is like their formula to be their prescription to try to solve X, right? Because right now their life doesn't have X and they want X, okay? So essentially what they've been telling you is that they've tried a couple different things to get here, but now we're frustrated, so we're on this call. But that's not like super, like it's obvious in the subtext. It's obvious because that's why they're booking a call. But you need to get them to talk about it again so they are persuaded, but also so you understand, right? So let's go back to our example of like the sales company that is not doing good enough in their CRM or something like that, right? Maybe they said, okay, well, we've tried to hire someone to do cold email. We've tried to have some new people on the phones, have better sales training when it comes to tonality and stuff like that. Well, right off the bat, we know that these are things that are going to be working on like the front end, like the cold email is going to bring in more leads. And we know that the sales training is going to be on the initial sales call, but follow-up is still not really talked about or spoken about. So they fundamentally have the wrong formula over here. They fundamentally have been putting in the wrong variables, okay? So you need to just ask them, what have you tried in the past to solve this problem? What has worked about it? What hasn't worked about it? Because within that, once again, you're clarifying even more what you just clarified and labeled. And also, you're getting them to realize that they've had all these attempts and they had all these shots on goal, but none of them have worked. And they're wasting all this time and effort and money and focus on these things that have not worked, right? It's a lot of work to try to solve something in a business. And so if you don't do it correctly, you're wasting time. And so that gets them to realize, like, damn, we've actually tried X, Y, Z, Q, W, Y, W, G, F, G, 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 A. Oh my gosh, I need to find someone that can solve this, right? And again, that's getting them to realize it. And so what you do next is you're starting to do the actual selling, because what you're selling here is going to be the fact that, hey, this formula has been wrong because of X particular reason or Y particular reason or Z particular reason, right? What we want to do is make sure you have the exact formula that you need, and we're going to give you this X equals F, right? You've used Y, you've used Z, you've used Q. Now we're going to do F. And why F? Because of everything you just told me, everything you've clarified, everything I've labeled, everything you've overviewed. Now I'm going to tell you exactly why you need what I'm telling you now. Okay? So this is where the selling begins. This is where the actual like verbiage of this is what we're going to do, the verbiage of this is what you need, the verbiage of this is what we're going to try, etc., actually starts to exist. Okay? And the thing with selling is you want to just keep it simple, right? This is the actual pitch if you use that terminology. And the key with the pitch is to make it simple, right? You don't need to go into the fundamentals of code. You don't need to go into the technical details of the things that you're building out. You just need to have a plan, right? So a simple 1, 2, 3-step plan of what you're going to do, right? And try to use common language. Try to dumb it down. Try to keep it in a very, everyone can understand language, right? You want to think of this as approaching someone who's never been in your field but has heard whispers about it, right? They probably heard some terminology, but there's no way they're going to know the very fine details, right? Like a person going to a mechanic, you don't need to talk to them about the viscosity of oil. You don't need to talk to them about the grip patterns of tires. You don't need to talk to them about what it's like to actually pull a dent from the fender. All you need to do is tell them, we're going to find a tire that suits your driving purposes. We're going to top you up with oil that's best suited for this year and make of the car based on the manufacturer. And we're going to smooth out this fender with techniques that we learned from previous work. And that last point, previous work, is also something you can include in this stage. You can say something like, this is the 3-step plan. And we've had plenty of results from using this 3-step plan, like with this customer, and this customer. And once you've done that, you move into letter E, and then this one is explain. And explain is very simply explaining away any sort of concerns that they have. So obviously, people are going to come to this with their own baggage of things that they've tried, things that they want, things that they hate, whatever. And they're going to say, well, what if this happens? What if X happens? Have an answer for those things, right? What if it takes longer than you expect? What if it takes shorter than you expect? What if I get a new salesperson? What if I have an old salesperson? What if I use this on Mac? What if I use this on Windows? Have answers to those questions, right? And a lot of these you don't want to start to get defensive about. You just want to simply explain them away as things that you've either dealt with or things that you could very easily deal with, and you have a plan to approach that, right? I want to acknowledge that some of these things you might not have a plan on how to tackle on the top of your head, but you want to have an idea on where to start looking. That alone is going to put people at ease. They're going to know that you're going to do the digging that is required to solve this problem and get it done for them. Last but not least, once you've reached this section, you are moving into reinforcing. You reinforce their decision, basically saying that's an excellent choice. We're going to make sure that we take care of X, Y, and Z. We're going to do it in this timely manner. You're going to get this, this, and this. And we're going to start off our next steps with this, this, and this. This is where you start to take a little bit more control, a little bit more lead. You start to tell them what's going to happen, right? In the beginning, you're doing a lot of asking. Now you're doing a lot of telling. You're just telling them, great job, great decision. We're going to fix this. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's the next step. I'll talk to you soon. And then that starts off the actual onboarding and starts off the service delivery, which is kind of similar in a way that you do want to have a whole process for that. It is essentially something different, so we're not going to go over it now. But even in just this, You can see how there is a lot of technique in order to get someone to feel like they are first understood, then to feel like you are the one to help them with that thing that you've just understood, and then that you are the one to guide them through that thing to actually solve their problem for them. All right, we are switching to a narration version here to talk about the other half of this, right? Now that we have the framework, which is that closer framework that I just talked about, I want to talk about what I mentioned earlier in the video, which is, why did I get it so wrong? Why did I think that being a closer meant being like a grouchy guy? It meant being someone that was always telling you you're wrong, always telling you this is what you need, always telling you why I'm right, etc., etc. And I think that, like I said earlier, there is some cultural stuff and there's some personal stuff, but I also think it does come down to some of the ways that sales is taught and some of the ways that you might absorb something like that. So let's take, for instance, the clarify step. Clarify can be misconstrued because what I learned it as sometimes was that you were digging for problems, right? The thing about problems is that people don't really like to talk about them. If they're on a phone call where they're potentially going to pay thousands of dollars because they're experiencing a problem, then it's a pretty big problem and people don't want to talk about it. So, in everyday life, people have grown accustomed to having these guards that they have before they'd ever mention that they're having a problem, right? Let's say you graduate school and you're not finding a job, then you might say, oh, I really have this opportunity in front of me here and it looks all good and it's going to pan out and it's going to be sweet and I'm going to be very fancy and I'm going to be very loved by my people because, they're going to see me and I'm going to do well and I'm just going to be like the person that everyone looks up to because I'm just doing so good and I'm going to shine on them, etc., etc. But the reality is that this guy is working like a part-time job at some place that he doesn't like or whatever. And these people, if they ever knew the actual truth, would be like, oh my God, look at this idiot. He's just so ridiculous. I'm going to go in here and laugh at this guy because look at him. He's actually quite embarrassing. He's like screaming into the void and he's like just not doing well at all. So basically what I'm trying to say here is that people have all these guards that protects them from having to face their problems. And when you're selling what I used to sell, which is more like B2C stuff, which is like losing weight or making more money or building your first business or something like that, you have to get past these guards. You have to see these guards and you have to just maneuver around them. And this was kind of taken by me as like an opportunity to show someone how much they suck. And I don't think that that's a healthy way to do it, right? Because one, even though you might be right that someone, on the outside has like a happy, nice face, but on the inside they're actually sad, this like moving them from one stage to another is going to make them feel like crap. And so moving them from one to another is not about making them feel like crap, but it is about getting to the root of why do they feel like crap? Because we want to take that and remove it, right? We're trying to remove the problem that is keeping you from going from sad to happy. I actually want you to have this transition. I want you to have this situation happen and get better. I want that to happen for you. But again, being immature as I was, I saw this opportunity to take someone that was doing not so great and claiming that they were doing great over here and then saying, actually, you suck because I sucked at that time. I was not that good at that time. I was in the same situation. At the end of the day, I was in the same situation where I wanted to look good to my friends, but inside I was actually feeling really, really crappy. And so I wanted them to experience the same sort of divide between these two because I wasn't going to accept somebody's lies when I had to not accept my own lies. I had to do the hard work to do that, right? The whole reason I got into sales was I realized that this gap existed here. And I realized I need to make more money because this is the truth. I look like this, but I feel like this. And so I wanted to fix that. And so I wasn't going to let someone, live with that sort of thing in their that sort of lie in their mind or anything like that. And it really just kind of annoyed me that they would try to do that. And so getting back into like what this means and how I felt about it, right? I used all these different tricks. I tried to get underneath the root of people's problems. I tried to go from this nice, excuse over here into the real raw reason over here. and I wanted to understand what was the actual thing that was happening in people's lives. Not what did they say was happening, but what was the actual thing happening in their life. So that took me to the idea of labeling, right? Because labeling, if you remember before, was basically telling someone the summary of their problem, right? Someone could say they're too big and they want to be skinny. Someone could say they're too broke and they want to be rich. But at the end of the day, you're basically creating that gap of where they are and where they want to be. Now, the situation or the deal with something like that is that you can take kind of a nice, kind-hearted way to talk about that. You can say you want to be nice and big and strong. You want to have these like cool muscles and that bicep vein there, and you want to really show people that you have the ability to lift big things and stuff like that. And you're just going to look overall and feel overall like happier and better, and we're going to make you nice and strong. But the reality is that people are actually more afraid of things. Like they avoid things much more than they go towards things, right? If they see that there is a potential life that is just very sad or scary or anything like that, people are much more basically motivated to avoid something like this rather than to have something in front of them that's like a nice reality. People will spend way less energy for something like this. They'll spend much more energy to avoid something like this. So in that example, what I could do is something as simple as like, okay, you've told me that you want to lose some weight because you feel kind of big, right? You feel like you're a little bit on the chubby side, whatever, and you want to lose that weight. Well, you can do it because reason A, you basically feel sluggish and you feel tired all day and you have, no energy to do anything. B, clothes don't feel too good and you want to make sure that when you go shopping, you don't feel embarrassed looking for, a big number in your pant size or something like that. And C, you have a wedding coming up and you just want to look good and feel good. And if you don't look good, it'll feel annoying to look at yourself in those pictures. Those are all pretty decent stuff, right? Let's say that's like a B+ type reasons. Those are really good. And in a lot of cases, that stuff will make the sale. But there is always a temptation, I think, to go a little further and get a little deeper into the point where you're talking to someone about potentially dying or having something like diabetes or not being around for the wedding at all because they're not going to make it because they're too fat. And these here, in some perspectives, can be seen as like S-tier sort of reasons, but they're so much more aggravating. They're so much more just like painful to talk about. And it ends up kind of leaking into your call. People end up feeling so bad that they just want to pay you some money so that they don't even have to think about this. But it actually doesn't make them motivated to do the plan here. They basically just want the conversation almost to end. And so that was something that I didn't really figure out till later, that even though, yes, technically this is like a more persuasive thing because it's a bigger enemy that they're running away from, it's sometimes is not necessary and a lot of times stains the conversation and makes it actually much less enjoyable. You end up leaving the call kind of taking some of that stuff yourself. And so that's what happened to me. Like I was the one on the call starting off, kind of chipper, very excited to help some people. But then because of some coaching, people were telling me like, hey, you're not spending enough time on this, negative stuff here. You need to add on this negative stuff. And so I had to bring it into my mind to take it into the prospect's mind. And then as soon as I started to do that, I became this guy that was kind of filled more so, or at least very much so like kind of attuned to be with that negative stuff, while I used to have some positive stuff in me, but that was no longer being allowed into my mind. I had such a barrier against that stuff because I was always so focused on like, what's the biggest, most negative picture that I can paint in their mind, and what's the most, useless version of this person that they could become. I want to make sure that they understand that that person is not that far away. And so, at a certain point, instead of operating from a place of like, most of my life is okay, most of my life is cool, 80% of what I do is good, there's that 20% though that could be potentially bad. So I need to, make some adjustments to make sure that I avoid this and that I capitalize on this here. Basically it flipped where I had 80% negative stuff, I was like, this is exactly what the fuck is going to happen if I don't do something like this 20% over here. And this is what makes people good consumers. And again, it is persuasive and it is good. But as a salesperson myself, like I said, it kind of changed me. It kind of made me think about the negative stuff myself a little bit more. And it ended up leaking into my calls and just becoming this like lifestyle of thinking about all the worst things about people. And so it really, really sucked. Then moving into the overview part, this is where you talk about other competitors or other people or other opportunities or other things that people could try or whatever. And when you're in a situation where you're trying to make commission money, you don't really have other opportunities. Every call is just so precious. And so what would happen is that, I would have a calendar of different calls, and sometimes that calendar was nice and full. I had a call here, I had a call there, I had a call here, I had a call there, I had a call there, etc., 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 right? Just a bunch of nice calls. And every time you see one of these on your calendar, you see opportunities for money. Basically, every one of these lines represented potential money. But other times you had a calendar that was not so full. It was actually quite sparse, and it was a little scary to look at when you were there on a Sunday or a Monday and you thought, oh my God, this money is so much smaller than what I thought. So every call became this opportunity, or almost like a requirement, to say, me, you need to do this, you need to do this, right? As we were talking about up here, you need to have this view, and not only this view, but you also need to basically say everything else is horrible. Don't put your eyes on anything else because it's all horrible, right? Everything else that you look at, all these other opportunities out there are complete and utter trash, and they suck, and this and this and this, and this and this and this. And once again, this is one of those things where, like, if you don't watch this kind of becomes a bit of a lie, or a bit of a series of lies, and you end up feeling like Pinocchio. And also you start to believe that everything really is trash. You start to believe that everything actually does suck, that everyone's an idiot, or all these things are wrong, or da-da-da-da-da. And then you can't learn. You actually become this guy that can't learn, and you become kind of a joke in a way, because you have, all these things that are out there on the internet that have valid points, but all you can do is say, because your commission check depends on it, all you can do is say, absolutely not. They're all ridiculous. They all suck. There is absolutely no reason to even consider them. You're kind of a joke for even considering them. What a stupid, silly little guy. And buy my stuff. Everyone else is horrible. And so that kind of makes you a little bit of a narcissist, right? Because as you move into the selling stuff, that's when you start to say, we're the best for this reason and this reason and this reason. And again, I want to recap that, all these things doesn't mean that selling is wrong, doesn't mean that believing in yourself is wrong, but it's a fine line, right? It's this difference between something like ego and something like confidence. I think even just saying that, everyone understands that there's a difference between that. Everyone understands that confidence is something that everyone wants, and ego is something that you might kind of want, but it really depends on your definition, because ego can be understood to be something that's like very destructive, performative, and fake. But you can also have a little bit of an ego that's like a chip on your shoulder that kind of starts to lean into confidence. And right, this is just the way that words function, right? Because so many people use this word, it kind of blends into this word down here. Oh, that was a weird glitch. But it blends into this word down here, and then you have this whole spectrum. And down here is good, but up here starts to get a little sketchy. So ego is not so great. Confidence is absolutely fantastic. Where you get in trouble is somewhere here in the middle, because you don't know which one you're operating on. And same thing with selling, right? Having pride in your product is absolutely fucking phenomenal. You need some of that. You need to have pride, because pride leads to price, right? If you don't have any pride, then you don't have a strong price, and you become not a premium person, but a commodity person. And if you say you're a commodity, and people are absolutely going to be willing to pay that low price, right? If you say something is super weak, it's just like, it's just a little thing that I do here now and again, versus something like, this is absolutely phenomenal. This is going to change your life, and this is going to do amazing things. And I work really hard at it, and I do it really, really well, and I care about it. Then there is a big difference in those two and what they deserve to be paid, right? So you need to have some pride. You need to have some price that reflects that pride, and you need to sell all that stuff. But again, if we're being fueled by all this like narcissistic stuff that we had over here and all these like negative emotions and all this fear that there's not enough calls on the calendar because if we don't close one of these people, we're going to go broke, this selling quickly becomes something that is kind of ridiculous. It quickly becomes something that is very negative. It quickly becomes something that is just absolutely not fun to do. And that brings us into, oh, wow, that's cool. More colors. That brings us to explaining, because explaining was when this all kind of like fell apart, right? You may have had a good conversation at this up until this point, but this is where people start to ask you like, okay, I see that you're selling me this box, but what about this specific thing right here, right? If we zoom into this, what can you actually tell me about this specific thing here? If we zoom into this, what can you actually tell me about this specific thing right here? And you start to feel, because of those other things that I just mentioned, that people are going to see this box and find flaws, find things that just don't work for them, etc., etc. And instead of doing the proper thing, which is taking a step back and saying, how am I actually going to address this situation here, and how am I going to make sure that this person, oh, that's not what I wanted. I want something like this. There you go. He's like pondering, you know what I mean? He's like, maybe that's like actually not good size. If I go a little bit bigger, you see it. There we go. It's like a little bit bigger. You know what I mean? He's like pondering it away. So if you have someone that's asking you about these different things right here, and then you actually care about the product and them, you're going to spend the time that it takes to sit here and ponder and figure out, they're right. Maybe they have talked about this specific thing in one way, but we have not used it in this context. So this is a solution that I need to tell them about. Or maybe they bring up a good point, but we already have something to talk about when it comes to that because we saw that somewhere else. And now why is going to be what I tell you about. So this part here, a lot of times made or braked the sale, made or broke the sale. And it's where kind of like all the insecurities of the product, if you will, came out. And it's where a lot of your insecurities came out if you're a bad salesperson. So I was having trouble with that myself because, again, when you're in that state where you need the commission, you need the thing to close, you need to, show your boss that you're not unworthy and you're about to get fired or something like that, you start to get kind of defensive rather than what you should be, which is just problem solving, which is just looking after the prospect, right? You see their concerns and you talk about those concerns. And if you don't have an immediate solution, you don't lie about an immediate solution. You talk about what you're going to do to find that solution or get that solution, okay? And then last but not least is going to be the reinforcing thing here, because reinforcing should be very simple, right? It should be very, very simple. It's just like, great, we're going to set you up with step 1, step 2, and step 3. This is how it goes. This is how it goes. This is how it goes. But if you've done everything that I talked about before in like that negative side of things, reinforcing comes with a little bit more heaviness and the prospect starts to feel it. You start to add in all this extra stuff of like, yeah, I won that shit. You suck. I got your money. Ha ha ha. In the back of your mind. And you think, what a loser. He's actually, needs to lose more weight than he thinks. And all these heavy weights here start to kind of be added into the conversation. And they have a larger chance of refunding or regretting their decision. I did have some calls where people felt this weight here. And then a couple minutes later or a couple hours later, they say, hey, buddy, actually, I felt kind of pressured at the end of the day. I didn't really like the conversation and I just want my money back, please. And you're like, well, I already spent it. And they're like, oh, well, I'm going to go talk to my credit card company. How about that? And you're like, that's true. You can do that because, that's consumer protectionism. And I get it. But at the end of the day, this isn't the goal. This isn't the idea. I don't love doing this. But when all those other things are true, when all the other realities that this is something that, has come from a place of desperation or wanting to prove people that you're right or wanting to show people that you know what's best for them and they don't know what's best for themselves or something like that, it really becomes this like aggressive, sad thing that makes you feel like crap, makes the person feel like crap, sells them something that they don't really feel bought in. They just feel like they need to do it in order to avoid more of that feeling like crap because you become the person that is very good at making people feel like crap, including yourself. And so that is not at all what I wanted sales to be. And it's what it became for me. And
absolutely not what I want to do going forward. So if you're a person that is feeling like crap as you sell, take this as a lesson that, yes, I understand there is a way that that can be the reality, and you don't want that to be the reality, right? Make sure that you're selling from a place of being a person that is building good stuff and ideal things, so that you can make sure that you make people happy and you make yourself happy, because there is a lot of good stuff being sold for great prices. You can be rich and be a happy person. You can be rich and make other people happy. And if you don't believe that, you're going to have a lot harder time getting rich. Okay. So that's my little sub lesson here. This guy is kind of a little bit of a dork here. He's becoming a cool guy. I'm giving him some big old ears there, looking like a nice gentleman there. And one more thing here. I don't know why, but I just feel like giving him a nice trucker hat or something like this, and maybe having like a nice W there for being Walton or something. I don't know why I thought of Walmart, but this guy deserves to be happy. You deserve to be happy. He deserves to be rich, and you deserve to be rich. Make money being a sales closer, but do not sell your soul in it. Make it better, do it better, and you'll be happier. Trust me.